Hi, good afternoon. My name is Soo Yuen Jien. I'm here to actually share with you some experiments actually we did in NUS. Compared to the last two colleagues that actually just spoke, I guess our system is actually smallest in scale. So hopefully you actually get some insight out of it. And I also realized that I'm again standing between you and your lunch and whatever, I guess, I don't know. Or maybe my next speaker will have that honor, right, to be the one standing in between of the audience and the lunch. Mine will be quite short, right, which is just nice, right, so that we actually can catch up because we're losing time. Okay, so this was actually my talk title. Actually, it's a question like when you connect little islands, what do you get? Okay, the first question that actually popped into mind is what do we mean by islands here, right? So here we're actually referring to the students, right, in the classroom, right? If you actually go behind a classroom and you observe them, you realize there are actually many tiny islands in the classroom, right? They're doing their own stuff. For example, even now, right? Everyone has their laptop, handphone, right? They're not actually listening to others. They are actually island, right, on their own. So actually set up to connect them. And when you connect a bunch of little islands, what you actually get is an archipelago, right? So that's why we actually have this name. So this is basically a classroom interaction system, or more commonly known as a classroom response system, right? Which you have quite a number of similar platform and tools out there. Right? So this is actually our attempt. Okay. So we set up to do this because we realized a very simple and important problem. Right? So for example, audience of this size, I think 20, 30 plus, after several weeks of lectures or tutorial, I probably know all your names. Okay, and then whenever I need some sort of interaction, I can just call your name and then ask you a question. Right? So for example, Chris, right, what do you think? Right, and then I can ask Min, right, I can ask Stephen and all that. Then you can actually have good interaction. Okay, but looking at the size of this lecture theater, and that is actually the common class size of most of the NUS module that we have. Right, so here this is very easy to handle. But when you have a bunch of students, like when you have 200 students staring down at you, now it becomes very difficult to interact with them, right? So some of us sometimes will actually ask the question, what do you think? And we don't actually expect an answer because in the crowd of their size, even they try to answer, you cannot pick up anything, right? There's no meaningful way to actually manage the chaos in a sense, right? So this is the problem that we set out to solve, right? Very, very simple, right? Interaction in a very big class is simply very hard, right? So we want to find a way that can actually automate the process, right? This is what computer people do, right? So to facilitate, to actually optimize certain things that can be done, right? So this is actually my observation, like what I just shared with you, right? So the students are actually on their island, right? They are doing their own stuff. They don't care what's happening, right? They are on Google, Facebook, or whatever, right? And not like on your lectures, right? So Archipelago set out to actually resolve this problem by trying to provide a platform to connect them up, right? So what will happen eventually is that the instructor will actually connect to a background server, set up certain virtual classroom, and use that to actually interact with all the students in the class via some sort of software, right, in a sense, right? So the instructor will set up a virtual classroom, right, instead of the real one, and then can set some certain limits. Because we are specifically trying to deal with a big class size, we actually encourage the student to form teams, right? So if we can say, oh, maybe I want only 100 groups of 3 students each, something like that. Then once you have that, then the student actually can use their own devices, right? Handphone, tablet, laptop, right, or whatever device actually can go onto the web, and then they can log in and form their own team. And now they actually can connect and interact with the lecture. Right? So once you have this, right, the fun will actually begin, right? Because you actually have the present or the virtual space, you can do a lot of things, right, that you can imagine. Okay, so one of the common solution in the real world is a hardware solution, like use a clicker and so on. But colleagues actually try to find that it's actually very hard to manage, right? So before the class, I need to distribute all the clickers, and after the class, I need to make sure I collect them back. I need to map the clicker ID to the student ID and things like that. Right? So all these problems actually can be solved easily, right, if you actually make use of a software solution. Okay. Right, so these are actually some screenshots. Right, so I will not actually go to the website to show you. So Archipelago is a platform, but currently is restricted only to NUS instructor. Right, so sorry about that. Right, so these are actually some screenshots. Right, we are actually still opening it only to the NUS colleague at the moment. So the first thing that we actually can do is that since it's actually a basically a web-based solution, right? Students using their handphone or whatever can actually log into the page, and then we will see their status right away. So for example, you can see whether they are online or offline. In this case, this screenshot is a bit alarming because you see no one is online, right? Because I take this screenshot after the session, right? So nobody is there anymore, right? So you can see them immediately, right? Then you can ask the typical kind of question, right? So MCQ question where after they click, you immediately see a graph that's actually updating in real time, like a stock market, right? And you actually can see which is actually an option that actually garner the most votes and things like that. And you can actually use this in many ways, right? For example, an MCQ like this, you actually can hide it first, I show the final result. Or what I find more interesting is that I actually put this up, right, when we start the question. Then you'll see students hesitating, right, when they actually see their option is actually not the most popular one, right? So for example, I'm staring at this graph, but I'm convinced that option 5 is correct, but that will actually take you several seconds more to think, am I right, or the whole class is wrong? Right, so I like that dynamic, right? So there are many ways that you can exploit this. So there are several kind of questions that we have implemented and are currently available. Right? So this is an MCQ, very straightforward. And we also give them something like a ranking or ordering question, where you have a set of options that they actually can order. Right? So for example, this is, because we are computing, this is an operating system question, where we actually ask the student that when they assess something, right, perform something, what is the correct step in carrying out the operation? Right? So given this set of steps, they are supposed to order it. Right? So this is actually the most commonly chosen series of steps, right, which you actually can see what is the sequence, right, of all of them. Right? So this is the ordering questions. Right? So the next one is actually this is actually MCQ, I'm sorry. Right? So the next one is actually giving them a picture, right, and ask them some question regarding the picture. Right? So for example, this I believe is a question from my colleague in chemistry. Right? So they ask, right, if you set up the experiment like this, which part is not set up properly? Right? So they actually can go and circle or whatever on the diagram itself, and then this is a heat map representation. Right? So the part that with the most number of votes in the sense, so I will actually show up grade. So in this case, I guess most of the class pointed out that this probably is actually the problem, right, and so on. And finally, we have a type of questions that actually point link concept to concept, right, from left to right, right. So for example, right, this is one concept. I ask them to link to the correct one. Then you actually can see the percentage of students that actually chose a particular link, right, and so on. Right? And last but not least, we have a very simple open-ended tool that actually allow the student to put in small phrases, and then we do a simple frequency analysis, and then show a word cloud. Right? So this is one way to tackle the open-ended question. And finally, we have this tool that's actually similar to Pigeonhole Live and so on, where actually the audience, they can actually pose their own questions, comments or whatever, where each other actually upvote it. And in this case, we actually chose to present it as a bubble chart. You will see a lot of bubble floating around, right, where the bubble actually grow in size when they actually get more votes and so on. The instructor can choose one of them, right, show the questions, I blank out the student name, right, and share the question to the whole class. And what we have done is that instead of just showing the question and let the instructor answering this, they can actually change this into a question right away, right? Add a question and then open to a class. This is one of the instructor technique, right? So if you don't know how to answer a question, what do? You ask the student, right? So what do you think, right? And then you pass the student the question back to the class. But this is actually an effective way to actually see how the class react, right, to a certain question. So this is a way that you can resolve the question, or you actually can post it up as an additional question. All right, so that is actually what we have, right, at the moment, right? So we have a platform that actually connect, right, all the islands together, and with name there's no surprise after you know where we actually came from, right? We call it archipelago. Okay, So we focus not only in the live session, right, during the interaction, we also make sure that there are enough follow-up, right, after the particular session, because unlike most other platforms, we have a very weird requirement, right? We actually want to make sure all participants are trackable, right? Which I guess the students don't like it. And many other tools allow you to anonymously log in, but this one is tracked, right? Everything is actually trackable. The invitation is via email, a verified email, right? That's why if you arrive at the platform, we are about, right, certain that you're actually the person that you are, right? So that's why we actually have a spreadsheet, right? Okay, computing people like a spreadsheet and data, I guess. Right, so you generate all kinds of data about what the student actually did in this particular session, what they have chosen, what time they make a choice, right, and so on. But this is only shared, right, to the instructor. Some instructors like to use this as a way to reward the student for participation and so on. We don't do that, but because we don't actually detail certain usage of the platform, but with this Excel, you can do whatever you want, right? Check whether a student present, check whether a student whether answer something, whether answer correctly, and so on, and what marks or whatever. Then on the left-hand side, what you have is a compiled report on every single question that you ask, right? So it becomes a PDF that is sort of like a revision material, right? So every question that you ask, you show the class response, and then you actually give the instructor a space, right, to put in some feedback, right, about what is wrong, right, with the public opinion, right, the most popular opinion of this particular question, and follow up with additional explanation and so on, right? So that is the PDF and the Excel, which will immediately forwarded to the instructor after they generate the report, okay? And that is actually the features we have, right, in a nutshell, right, in 5 minutes basically. And this is some usage data that I can share with the audience here. Right, so this system actually went online about 1.5 years ago, and is restricted only in NUS, right? So the number of instructors, right, that we actually currently support is about 82. Right? So these are distinct instructors, right? And the courses that we support in NUS is 102, and in the last semester about 36 of them. Right, the active students will actually answer at least one question is 5,000 and so on, right? So all this data is gathered from the last semester usage, which is the January to May period, right, of 2017. And we actually try to get some feedback, right, from the students. Right, the first question we ask, right, which is a no-brainer, I guess, to ask them, do you think this platform help you to interact with the lecturer? Then of course you can imagine this you get very positive feedback, but more importantly, you want to make sure by using this tool, it doesn't disrupt the lecture, right, the normal flow of the lecture, right? You increase interaction, but if it's in the expense of your learning, right, then that's something that we need to look at, right? So the next question is whether this tool actually disrupt, right, your learning during the typical lecture. Right, so fortunately, we get a positive outcome on this as well. So this is a data collected from last semester courses based on about 419 students, right, if I remember correctly. Right, so these are all the feedback that we have so far. And at this point, we are happy to say that this platform is sort of adopted, right, by the NUS CIT. They actually have support on this to actually help other colleagues in NUS to make use of this particular course, this particular platform. Right. So the main challenges, I guess, the other two colleagues of mine didn't actually manage to mention this. I guess if they have time, they will actually mention almost exactly the same thing, right? So the challenges that we face in actually developing all this is, of course, this one, time. Right. So we are here to do research or teaching. Right? We are not here to actually build a platform that used by everyone else, right? So being a system maintainer at the same time as you teach is rather challenging and very scary, right? So imagine you're teaching halfway and then your system went down. If it's you using it, it's okay, right? You will feel that, oh, it's my own fault, it's fine, right? But when you're teaching it, someone in chemistry, someone in biology using it and it crashed and then doing the whole lecture, you feel very, very bad about it, right? So this is actually one of the key problems that I myself face. Right? So throughout the whole semester, we actually always panicking, right? On the verge of panicking all the time. Right? So time is a key issue. Secondly, we need time to actually develop the features and test it properly and so on. So resources, right, is one of the key problems and challenges that we feel. Okay, all right, so that is my very short talk. I promised about 10 minutes plus. This is actually the summary of what we have, right? So multiple question type, student online status, and you have a question board to actually get all the comments, feedback from the crowd. And finally, there's a post-action summary by PDF and so on. So it's actually kind of open to all NUS colleagues. But if you are interested to take a look at this, you can send me an email and we can actually open it up to you to actually take a look. Right, so that is my short introduction to this idea. So I guess this is a Q&A part. Right, so yeah, I'm welcome to have any questions.